Welcome to episode 61 of Successful Demo, which episode analyze the theoretical aspects of one newly released cards. Well, we haven't had newly released cards for a while, and I did mention that it would be the end of the Successful Demo series, but then the champ cards appeared, so I thought I'd do a Successful Demo on those, and since they were designed by members from our very own community, why not get them on board as well? So today, joining me is the very esteemed Mike Sheehan, who won Euros, the inaugural Euros 2017. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Ben. How are you?
Hi. Yep, doing awesome. And wow, it's been a long time in the making, your champ card, hasn't it?
Yes. Yeah, it took a while to get here. I didn't have to wait as long as Chris, for example, and certainly not as long as Dan for a couple of his cards. But yeah, we got there in the end.
Yep, indeed. I remember doing the video with you on your Euros victory. And yeah, at that time I was really excited to see what you come up with your champ card, and we finally get to see it. A little late. I think Magnum Opus happened like what, 2 months ago, but late is better than never, and I guess this is a good time to get down to it. So for those of you out of the loop, Mike here designed Labor Rights, the Anarch event. But before we talk about the card itself, let's dive into some history. So going back to 2017, you won Euros, and you got the right to design the card. I guess FFG approached you shortly after, and was Labor Rights immediately on the top of your hit list when it came to this is the card I want to design?
So I have a terrible confession to make, and that confession is the first card I designed was actually a Shaper card.
Oh.
Yeah, that was the first thing I thought of. So I had an idea about ice manipulation, and so Michael Boggs had sent me like this, I guess like a color chart maybe, right, for the different identities or factions. So he was talking about the themes that were going to be coming up. So one of the themes for Shaper was that they were going to use power counters, also that they had a focus on programs, and maybe some more ice manipulation. So I thought it might be interesting to create a program that you could, for example, maybe only install if you ran R&D, and that it would have X number of power counters, and that those power counters could be used as a paid ability to swap two pieces of ice.
Whoa!
Yeah. So, like, this is the thing, right? It sounds really powerful, but then when you think about it, like, Escher is an amazing card, but also kind of niche. Like, not a lot of runner decks included. I know it's 5 influence, so it's tough to splash, right? But I mean, not a lot of Shapers included. So he sent that to a couple of testers for like a kind of preliminary feedback thing, and
it was shot down immediately.
Oh yeah. This card is busted. We can never
play
it. Oh my god! Right?
No.
So I gave it some more thought, and we kind of had a gap in communication at that point where I didn't hear from him for a little while, but I thought about it more, and I definitely in terms of the faction I identify most with, it was definitely Anarchs. Also, like, I had won this prize on the back of playing what was the peak Anarch deck at the time, which was like Siphon Recursion Wizard. So I thought, you know what, the right thing to do here is try to make an Anarch card.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because had you went through with that Shaper card, we would actually have our first champion design Shaper card. I think as it stands, Shaper's the only faction that doesn't have a champ card.
Wow.
Yep. So missed opportunity? Maybe not. I don't know. But anyway.
Yeah, I think it might be a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm surprised design win for them, but look, his card is really cool.
Yeah.
So we got chatting again, Mike and I, and he made us an offer, right, to all of the testers, that we would do things a little bit differently. So instead of just designing one card, we'd actually design 2 cards, and we would test those cards for maybe like 5 or 6 iterations, and at the end of testing, we could make a decision and say, look, this is the card that I like more, or I think does more for the game, or that I think, got the most positive feedback in testing, and we would go with that one.
That sounds like a good process. So I guess you quickly came up with your 2 cards?
I did. And spoiler alert number 2, neither of those was Labor Rights. Yes. So I mentioned that I'm interested in a couple of things in terms of the Anarch faction. I love Vamp as a card, right? I love like pretty much everything about it, right? Like we've got account siphon for criminals where sure you're draining some money, but you're gaining money in advantage for it. Anarchs don't even care. They're like, you know what? I'm draining your money. I don't even need money in return. I'm just getting rid of yours. That's what this is about. So I have always loved Valencia. Like since the moment she was spoiled for Order and Chaos, like she was pretty much my favorite runner. And I wanted to incorporate bad publicity into credit denial. I also love cards like itinerant protesters or investigative journalism. And by the time I was designing the card, mining accident was in the card pool. So my idea was that we would have a run event maybe where you run HQ or like run a central server, and the corporation would lose X number of credits, where X is the amount of bad publicity you have.
That seems okay.
So yeah, I like the idea of it. Michael Boggs suggested that maybe it would be better as a program, that we would try to implement something like that. And that's where the problem started for that card. So our testers, who are really great, I have to say, just huge shout out to them. They went through a couple of iterations, but there was no way to make it work that wasn't super oppressive. Like we even tried to put caveats on it, right? Like you can only use the ability on this program if you have less money than the corporation. We made it cost an insane amount of money. Everything, we couldn't get it balanced.
Yeah, that sounds super clunky. I mean, basically, to me, it sounds like what you propose is basically a souped up version of Lamprey.
Good shout.
Yeah.
So that was one card idea.
Yep.
The other card, and the card that I was, I think, much more attached to, was a card that I was tentatively calling like an old friend. So my idea for the card, including art, was that you'd have a resource that was a connection, and it would have like art featuring Quetzal. And the idea was that this theoretically was going to come out after Quetzal had rotated, which we know hasn't happened now. The idea was that you'd have a non-paid ability on the card, and you'd say at the start of your turn, you pick Code Gate, Barrier, or Sentry, and once per turn, you can break one of those subtypes, which is kind of a play on the fact that once per turn, Quetzal can break a barrier.
Yep.
So I enjoyed that a lot, and that got a lot of testing. So that was tested right up until the end. I think we tested maybe 3 iterations of the other card, that credit denial one, and it was clear that wasn't going to work. So I actually originally suggested 3 cards to Michael Boggs, but gone for the other 2. The third card I suggested was an Anarch recursion card that played on, Max's trashing 2 cards and drawing a card thing.
That sounds terrible.
Build a deck around something like that.
That's interesting.
That is how Labor Rights was born.
Yeah.
And it went through a few changes.
So before we talk about those changes, so I think you've covered a lot of card designs, and I think it's really cool to hear that for every one champ card that all the netrunners get to see, there's so much blood and sweat that went on behind the scenes, so many failed designs that went in the bin. So how do you actually begin coming up with these card ideas? I know some people come up with card ideas based on art, they or theme, they have a certain theme in mind, or as you said, perhaps a favorite faction, and they start working from there. Other players, more those super competitive players perhaps want to design a card that fixes something in the game or has a certain mechanic. And there are some people who just want to make a mockery of FFG and design a card like timely public release. But so which angle did you attack this card design problem from?
So I tried to look at it from a couple of perspectives. The first one was theme for sure. Like I like Anarchs as a faction. Like they have fantastic cards. Like come on, like they're definitely they're in my opinion the strongest of the runners. But they're also, I think, thematically the most interesting. Like the reasons that they do what they do, particularly Valencia, right? It's this idea that everyone deserves a chance. As corny as it sounds, I think is really nice. So within that, then, like one of the more maybe underexplored parts of their faction is the idea of like workers' rights. So we have it a bit with Eddie Kim. Like he's definitely one of these guys who's like, if we have so much like bioroids or well, specifically bioroids for him, right? But like non-human workers, I guess,
Hmm.
that takes some power away from humans. So that was something I was interested in exploring, and I tried to find a way that I could put something that was tentatively connected with workers' rights and laborers' rights, or labor rights, into a card. So I thought about the idea of, sacrificing, like work, I guess, is like you sacrifice your time and you get financial compensation in return. So we kind of have cards like that in the game already in the form of day job. So I thought, what about if we kind of twist it a bit, and if you sacrifice like potential upcoming cards, you can get other cards back. So obviously we know that recursion's already part of the Anar faction. Shout outs to Deja Vu. I will always love that card.
Oh, yeah, good old times. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
uh, yeah. So that's where labor rights came from.
That's really nice.
Uh,
I hope that wasn't yeah, I hope for your sake that that wasn't inspired by real life events or personal yeah, your personal life.
no, no. Like yeah, I definitely have those kind of ideologies, but yeah, yeah.
Okay. So yeah, so that's how Labor Rights was born. And okay, so let's talk about the card itself. So you've mentioned that's how the mechanics tie with the theme, and I think now that you explained it, I think it works really well. I didn't actually see it at first, but now that you explain it, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a bit tentative. I can, yeah, but yeah, it's cool.
yeah, yeah. At least it relates to the card. There are some other cards in the card pool that just baffle me, in terms of mechanics gelling with theme. But anyway, for labor rights, yeah. So was the printed card as we see now your original design, or did the playtesting iterations modify certain numbers or certain mechanics of it?
Yeah, so we did get modifications. The first version of the card that I had suggested was a one cost event, and it was trash the top three cards of your stack and then recur three cards, with no limitations.
Right.
So that went to test, and like we got the general feedback that yeah, this could be useful. I mean, it seems okay. And then I believe it was Sam Swede sent me a message on Slack, and he's like, "Hey, just a heads up, I think I found a way to break your card. We should probably remove it from the game."
Yep.
So he didn't go into details, but I think the sentiment was that you maybe build it out of Crim, you rush to the bottom of your stack, and then you recur.
Labor rights with labor rights.
This is it, labor rights, and then maybe two diversion of funds.
Yep.
And then you recur another labor rights and two diversion of funds, and
Yep.
you kind of just go infinite from there, and that's 100% NPE, right?
Yep.
Like, if you can land the diversion of funds, yeah, it's really unpleasant. Like maybe you recur a labor rights, diversion of funds, and DDoS. So we very quickly put the extra caveat on it saying whenever you play labor rights, remove it from the game.
Right.
So that was step one. But we actually had messed around with a couple of different numbers. So we tested it at 4 and 4, which was like it was a possibility for a while. But what we ultimately went with was 3 and 3 and draw a card.
Yeah.
And the final change, I believe, was to go 3 and 3, draw a card, and also make it zero cost. And the reason we had made it zero cost is we had gotten feedback from some of the more, say, competitively focused playtesters. So, like, one of the things I commend Michael Boggs on is the selection of playtesters we had kind of like spanned a lot of different netrunner philosophies, right? As in, like, we had playtesters who would be pretty casual players, some very competitive players, some people who like literally just play at their kitchen table, and all input was considered valuable. So we had feedback from a couple of the competitive players that labor rights was significantly below the power curve, so they wanted to see a boost to it. So making it zero cost and also drawing one card were two of those boosts.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's it's really interesting to hear the design process, and I think it's really good assurance that even though the game was going to end, there was still a lot of effort put into playtesting. That's really cool, and so that's how labor rights was born.
Yes.
Yeah. So are you satisfied with the final outcome?
I think for the most part I am. Yeah. I'd probably agree that it's a little below the power curve. What I would say is I think the card has so inherently it's got variance in it, right? You don't know what you're trashing from the top of your stack.
Yep.
Um, unless you're trashing nothing from the top of your stack, in which case it becomes, I think, significantly better, right?
Yeah.
So there are two good use cases for it. One is you're trying to recur something that you've binned earlier in the game. But if you can get to the end of your stack, which is not a trivial thing to do, or is very trivial in max, then it becomes much more powerful, right? Because the first thing is you're not milling anything. Second of all, you're recurring three cards and immediately drawing one of those. So with a zero cost click, you have a 1/3 chance of drawing one of three cards that you choose. And if you recur, say, an indexing and a legwork and a, I don't know, diversion of funds, like you're drawing into a good card. I'm
Yep.
not sure what deck runs all three of those, but
I mean, the other thing
um,
you can do is to recur three of the same card, then it guarantees that you
yeah,
will draw one of those.
yeah, that's
So,
it. So, I played it at Worlds in one of the side events. So I played it out of Max because I think it kind of naturally fits into Max. Um, and because I had included labor rights, I felt a bit more comfortable with going for, say, one levy and two same old things. But I milled all three of them. And playing labor rights guaranteed that I got at least one of them back. So
ah.
yeah, it's a nice safety valve in that respect. But like saying that your card is a safety valve isn't like super complimentary to it.
No, I think there's I wouldn't say it's so much of a safety valve as what a card that increases consistency in your deck, and I think that's a card that competitive players would definitely appreciate. Yeah, so when I first looked at the card, all the champ cards were spoiled at basically the same time. I do kind of agree that it's a bit below the curve compared to the other champ cards, but I think one of the good things about your design was that it was a lot more thought-provoking than a lot of the other cards. Like, I mean, not this. Of course, I don't mean this as an attack on the other champions. Of course, all of them design very good cards. Like crowdfunding, for example, you look at that card, you read it, and you immediately go, "Oh, okay, that's gonna fit very well in a run-based deck." End of story. With labor rights, it's a bit more tricky, right? There's so many ways, so many places you can play this. At 2 influence, you can definitely splash out of faction as well. So, yeah, a lot of ways to go about playing labor rights.
Yeah,
Did you
actually,
actually?
that's
Sorry.
so that reminded me. Sorry to interrupt. That
Yeah, go
reminded me.
ahead.
It was originally 3 influence.
Aha. Okay.
Yeah, and I made the argument that I would like to be able to splash this in something like Criminal. And the reason we said, okay, let's allow it to be splashed in Criminal is because it's a genuine risk in Criminal, right? Like if you play this and you trash a couple of programs, you could be in a lot of trouble there. So it was deemed to be something that was safe enough to do.
I see. Yep. Yeah, that
Mm.
makes a lot of sense. I mean, you can always get those programs back with labor rights. The cards that
You
you just
can.
trash can go back.
Yeah.
Yeah, but what I was really trying to do was to build a deck where playing labor rights, even though your stack isn't empty, is a good idea. So immediately, the first thing that came to my mind was playing all the bin breakers, the conspiracy breakers. So
Mm.
it's kind of like inject, where if you mill your conspiracies with labor rights, that actively helps you, essentially getting your breakers out for you. Yeah, so I think basically there's a lot of ways you can. There are a lot of nuances with your card, and there's lots of things to discover. Um, to go off a monologue for a little bit, some of you viewers who've watched my previous videos would know that I've brought your champ card to charity gift. Yeah, I was very excited to play your card. Um, as I said, it's a very intriguing card, so I tried it in Noise, uh, which I think is the second best home for labor rights outside of Max, of course. The ability to just plow through your entire deck and then recur 3 viruses and mill the corp 3 is pretty insane. So that was my idea of fun, milling the corp by installing a bunch of caches milled by labor rights. Interestingly, I found that labor rights was kind of underwhelming because I hardly ever made it to the bottom of my deck. The game would have ended by then. So It's actually quite difficult to get to the bottom of your deck, as it turns out, and labor rights made me discover that fact, which is pretty interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So
I could definitely see that.
yeah. But for yourself, did you have a specific deck in mind when you were designing this card that you were like, I want to design this card so that it fits in a certain pet deck of mine, or this deck, this Anarch deck that I'm looking at?
So I genuinely didn't, right? Like I designed it hoping it would be broadly useful in a variety of decks. Um, but I think like the more we play tested it and the more I like played with it myself, the more I realized that its use does vary a lot. Like it is somewhat useful if you're playing it in the middle of a game. Like if you're playing, say, an Anarch deck that has maybe three of each bin breaker, right? Its value increases. And there's definitely, like, whenever we had a Scorp meta, right, there was definitely an argument that three of each bin breaker, or heat breaker, sorry, three of each heat breaker is a good idea. So it would have fit really nicely there. But if you get to the end of the deck, then obviously it's much stronger. So like the more I played with it, the more I was like, yeah, this like mechanically it feels like a max card. But whenever you play it, yeah, 100%, it definitely works best in max, I think.
Yeah. Right. So before we actually talk about a deck, the deck that we're gonna play, let's look at the alt art for this card. I think a lot of people don't even realize that an alt art already exists for labor rights. This was
Yeah.
a custom design by Ketchen, is that right?
Yes, that is correct, and I absolutely love it.
I love it as well. So, what was the history behind this? Because not all the champions actually commissioned alt arts. I believe only yourself and Chris Dyer did so.
So we both commissioned art from Kat. I know Alexis did art for Wolfie's card, a really, really nice version of Slot Machine.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a really cool robot on it. I love that card. So the story behind this is going to sound kind of negative.
That's
We
fine.
all got stock cards, right? So we got stock art for our cards. And Michael was super apologetic about it. He was like, look, they're like we've moved away from putting runners' faces on cards. So like the classic Juice is Wild wasn't going to happen, right? But originally he had posed that question to me, right? He was like, "Would you like to be on the card? Because you don't need to be." And initially I was like, "I don't know if I want to be on a card." But once I found out that the game was like officially winding up in terms of FFG's involvement with it, I thought, you know what? No, I've got an opportunity to do this. I'm definitely doing this. So the first thing I would say is I do like the art on the FFG version of the card. But was it Sam, I think? Set up like a group in Slack called After School Art Project, and he was like, "Hey, we're all thinking about reaching out to community artists to do art for the cards." And I immediately thought of Kat because I love her artwork, and I think like the early stuff like Amuku is amazing, but like Celebrity Gift, the one that she had at Worlds this year, oh my god,
Yeah.
just amazing. Like definitely my favorite like community piece of art for the game, and she was so great to work with. She turned this card around in like about a week, like
Wow.
as in like I'd wake up in the morning and she would still be online and she's like, "Hey, it's like 2 o'clock in the morning here, but I'm getting this done." And I was like, "You're way too good." And I love what she did. So the card is me in the front,
Yep.
and she also incorporated two of my friends. So Mark from Ice Ice Hedge Fund is holding the "Employees Must Strike" sign in the back.
Nice.
Yeah, and my friend Barry, who is a big fan of Ken Tenma, is the guy in the middle. So clearly he runs in the same gang as Ken or something.
Nice. So that's the story
Yeah.
behind the Kentama outfit. That's brilliant.
Yes, it is. Yeah, and Kat's work is it's just fantastic. I love the colors on it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's absolutely what I love. Bringing out the personalities behind the card. That's, it makes the champ card feel more you, and well,
Yeah,
that's the whole point
and
of the champ
like
card.
we all saw what she did with Chris's card. That just blew me away. Like,
We'll talk about that with Chris in an upcoming
yeah,
episode.
for sure.
But yes,
No spoilers.
that one's amazing. Right. So yeah. So that's labor rights for you. Everything from the history to the card art to the mechanics design, everything. So that's all done for now. But we will be, as this is a successful demo, as with tradition, we'll be playing a deck featuring this card. So usually, I'll be handcrafting these decks myself from scratch. But because, this is Mike's card, I decided, hey, why not give him the limelight and see what he came up with. So he came up with a couple of decks, and I took the one that looked the most fun. And by that, I mean the most degenerate. So have a look at this. This Apocalypse Max, because you just can't have enough Apocalypse in your life, can you, Mike?
No, Apocalypse is my favorite card in all of Netrunner. It's just, I think it's a masterpiece. Like, even just the idea, like the run 3 servers. So, like, this is a bit of a tangent. At Worlds, when we were designing the cards, I was the day that designed the runner card, right? And the first choice was make a run or only play this card if you run all 3 central servers. And I was like, yes, Apocalypse, something like this again. And unfortunately, that was not the winning design.
Oh.
But yeah, this is a really cool deck. It's all about disruption. So you've got your wanton destructions, apocalypses, a couple of amped ups, which is going to make it hopefully a bit easier, and definitely did in testing to land the apocalypse. And then you've got good targets for labor rights as well. So it's easy to mill an apocalypse. So if you get near the end of your deck, you could bring that back. Maybe bring back a DDoS to help land it a bit easier. Bring back a legwork as well is also really powerful.
Nice. All right. I suspect this is going to be really powerful, but there's only one way to truly find it out. Let's head to JNet and see how things work out.